there. We're back. Welcome to a brand new episode of Qué Pasó podcast. My name is Eduardo.
I'm Ernest.
Well, Pablo, how you doing, guys? It's been how long?
More than a year, almost a year actually, when we went on a hiatus.
Yeah,
Hiatus?
that was my fault because student.
Yeah, but a lot of things have been going on since we've been gone. There's
Oh yeah,
there's a new intifada, of course, housing crisis in Canada, and there's been a lot of elections in South America, including one very contentious in Argentina.
yeah, and I mean, this year's election cycle is not yet done, but we are mostly talking about the elections that that have already passed. So let's sit back, relax, and join us for a new conversation about these new topics. So,
Yes. So
okay, Ernest. So you were saying something about a housing crisis in Canada.
yes. So this is something that I'm starting to have a little bit more experience with, being a student living outside of the town I spent the last couple of years being in. Now I live in the city. And while that is awesome, I quite like it. There is a lot of this housing crisis issues, um, and it's been happening slowly over the last couple of years. But only recently we've really seen it start to get to the point where it's starting to scare people. Um, and what happened is part of it is due to this housing bubble. So like housing prices in Canada have gone through the roof. Like there's houses in Toronto, for example, that were valued before, say, $500,000. Now they're up like 20, 30%, even like into the million range for certain houses. There's a shortage of them as well. There's people are not really also building apartments anymore. They're not having rental units. They're taking them and converting them into, they're using this land to get single use housing or single
Hmm.
uh family dwellings. And that's really really nice. But then we also have a lot of immigration here, and that's because we've made things a little bit different in terms of how people get student visas, how much hours they can work, and things like that. And all these things have had an impact. Like this year alone, Canada welcomed almost 1 million students to Canada to study at our universities. And or I think that's students and immigrants in general, but it's still a million people a year. That's a lot of people, guys. And housing is limited. We are a large
Yeah.
country, but we don't have the dwellings. Like I know, for example, here in St. John's in Newfoundland, the price of renting in this city has gone through the roof because what happens is there's people who are buying up a lot of these houses, and they're turning them into student housing. And what they're doing is, so they'll get the house, and the normal rent for that room probably 5 years ago would have been $400, $500. Now they're charging $750 a room plus utilities.
Let's
Nice.
see. One question about what it is like. I know when it's constructing houses, are there too many like taxes involved into that? Like the government is taxing too much of the construction?
It's part of that, and it's also just a lot of really bad policy. You see, the government hasn't really been focusing on this. They've been trying to deal with all the other stuff. They say COVID caused it, this and that. Everything kind of ends up being blamed on COVID and these other issues. But it's not necessarily the case. It's mostly comes down to bad policy and the fact that governments, both provincial and federal, have not been keeping an eye on this. They have not been focusing on a lot of this expansion of housing, not making affordable rental units. And the thing is like it's it has this effect now. We are seeing people, like I know people who are living in living rooms because they don't have anywhere else to stay. They can't find houses. Like
Mm.
and it's sad to see. Like even me, I was looking for a place for a while, and I was lucky that I had some good friends from university who were more than willing to kind of put me up or like get a place with me. So I'm really lucky I got this. But like the last place I was living in was half the size of this, and I was paying like $700 for the month. It was insane. And I don't know how the students are going to do it. And the thing is, a lot of the people getting this housing, they're not local students. They're not Newfoundlanders. They're not even Canadians. They're the majority of them are from they're from India. They're from Bangladesh. They're from Nigeria. There's a lot of these countries that are kind of these middle income countries where people are coming here, and it's really contributing to the squeeze on housing prices because there's such a demand, and with the demand and limited supply, obviously the price of rent's going to go up. um,
Mhm.
and people are always going to take advantage of this. The government has now kind of looked at this and said, "Oh crap, time to panic a bit." And what they've kind of done now is they started talking about maybe we need to start reducing the international student influx. And while that's a start, it's not something that I believe is the only solution. There's a lot of other things the government can do, but this is the one that they think is going to get them the most kind of popular support because immigration has always been a bit of a or lately has been a contentious issue in Canada. And with an election coming up, it's going to soon be time for the government to do something.
When is election?
Honest, I believe it's next year.
Oh,
And
right.
Trudeau is not looking good. Polyev is doing quite well in the polls. He's on a constant. He's on constantly on the road. He was here in Newfoundland last month,
Oh,
talking about
really?
axing the carbon tax. Oh yeah, yeah. He's been here a couple of times. It's quite great.
Do you think he has any chances?
Oh my goodness, yes, yes. He does. Um, he is really going to do well this time around because people are just sick of Trudeau. We had Aaron O'Toole the last time running as the leader of the Conservatives, and he was atrocious. He was like, he was just, oh God, I don't want to think about him anymore. But the thing is, Polyev, I don't know how well he's going to handle this because this kind of issue really requires a lot of work because we really need to address this housing problem. But the other issue is the government also doesn't really want to do it because the higher the price of housing is, the more money the government collects on taxes. So
Oh, I see.
Of course.
why are you going to affect your tax revenue with a rocking hot housing market when you're going to lose money? I mean, you might lose an election, but politicians they can work their way around that. But like I think the people who are going to suffer from this housing crisis aren't just the Canadians themselves. It's a lot of these international students because they're going to be scapegoated, in my opinion, a lot than and immigrants in general because they're coming here and they're taking up all these housing, and the government is going to start doing things to limit the ability of these immigrants to or these students to come and live and work here. And one thing they're going to start doing is they're going to change the amount of hours they're allowed to work. So right now, the government last year put in a policy that international students could work as many hours as they wanted. Prior to that, they could only work 20 hours a week. So the government is now I think they're going to limit that again back down to 20. That's going to hurt a lot of people who are trying to pay off their student loans, who are trying to pay or not their student loans, their tuition fees, which are horrifyingly high for international students. It's like 3 times what a Canadian would pay. Um, and that's a whole nother episode, guys. The whole like being an immigrant student or an international student in Canada. Oh, the stories I can tell you as part of the organizations I'm with here in the city. It's insane the way the government treats these people.
Mm.
But yeah, do you guys have any questions so far?
Sorry.
So, but, I mean, did the government had any public policies to deal with this housing crisis? I mean, the current Trudeau's administration, did he had something like an idea to what to do about it?
Yeah, it's called I will talk about it. That's I will talk about creating a plan, but not do a plan. Like the government of Newfoundland is a bit something I'm a bit more familiar with. Like our provincial government, they said, "Oh yeah, no, there's not so much of a housing crisis here. We're building a lot more affordable housing." This was mostly housing crisis slash homelessness issue,
Hmm.
and the government said, "Oh yeah, we built like I think it was." 750. We have 750 new units available. And then when the CBC looked into it, they had like six. And
600.
yeah, no,
Uh,
they had six. They had
six.
six houses.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 houses.
Six units. Yeah. I'm gonna try to find the link here.
One question regarding immigration into Canada, Ernest. Where does
Mhm.
most of the immigration comes from? Which region, in particular? Because I could say
Mostly.
I assume that you're not getting a lot of people from the southern border.
We do get a lot of Ecuadorians here, Colombians as well, and
Ah,
people from
mamita.
Eduardo. Well, it's mostly Eduardo's neck of the woods. A lot of people from Sinaloa live here now.
Yeah.
Um, it, yeah, it's it's quite interesting to see, but a lot of them are majority are from India. You have two kind of major groups. You have your South Indians, which are a lot of them coming in, and you have people from the Punjab. So
Six.
that's yeah, the Sikhs. Yeah, so you have a lot of Sikhs coming in. Um, Depends on where they go though. A lot of the Sikhs they'll generally go to say a place called Brampton. They'll go to Surrey. They'll go to Coquitlam. Up in British Columbia. They're not going to go really to Newfoundland, but people are starting to come to Newfoundland more now because um, through the provincial nomination program, it's easier for you to get PR here. So if you come to Newfoundland, you spend less time than you would say through Ontario or Alberta. Oh, here it is, guys. Um, the housing minister said 750 new homes have been built in 2 years. It's less, much less. Let me see. How many did they get? 11 actually. They've only built 11 houses.
11. And that's all.
11. That's it. And had the minister said, "Oh yeah, in 2 years we built 750 new homes."
I remember a time when Canada was considered an example to follow in the Americas, and now I'm looking at it like, no, like, like
Oh yes,
I don't
it's a
know.
lot different now.
It's interesting to hear about it because I mean, to me, when I look at, for example, like the government of Canada, for example, Trudeau, I always feel a lot of people really like him. But the thing is that when you start to realize who he is, what he's actually done, he's the darling that you think he is. I mean, I always thought that the thing with Trudeau is that he only knows how to like talk when he has like a script. He doesn't know how to handle people like without it.
He actually has a lot of like kind of thing when he speaks.
I
It's
see.
really irritating.
It's
Um,
like Obama.
here's me doing it. No, worse than Obama. He was worse. He's worse than Obama. Obama at least can be somewhat charismatic. But
Mm.
yeah. So long story short, Trudeau has made a hash of it. A lot of the provincial governments have made a hash of this because nobody really thought about this until it becomes a problem, and that's the way the government here works. And I think that's kind of common for most governments. We only really get concerned about an issue when it becomes a political one,
Yeah, I
like
see.
the opioid
Mm.
crisis.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah. And well, I mean, in this case, I remember this comment that went viral from Trudeau that homelessness was a feminist issue or something because was sexist. I think he said because 20% of homeless people in Canada were women, and
Yeah. He
is
says
that
a lot of
his
things.
plan? Is that his
I don't
plan?
even know. I don't even know what his plan is anymore. His plan is right now to lick his finger, stick it up in the air, and see where the wind blows. That's
Okay.
literally it. Like just like as we get closer to the election, we're going to see. I'm predicting it's going to be housing crisis is going to be the big one, and he's going to. You're going to see a lot of policy promises on that, and I'll be keeping an eye on it because as part of a student organization I'm with, I have to kind of keep an eye on it.
Okay.
So that's going to be my thing. When I hear a bit more, I'll let you guys know. And we can bring it into another episode of the podcast.
Okay.
Yeah, we
It's
sure we can.
it's a tricky issue. This the housing crisis. I mean, if you remember Jacinda Ardern from New Zealand, the first time she was elected as prime minister was on a platform of building affordable housing, and I think her target was like 100,000 affordable housing units. Of course, she didn't make the mark. It was, I mean, it was simply ridiculous, and she got reelected because she did a good work with the pandemic. Well, well, more or less, you depending what you ask. Uh, she uh, she took a couple of draconian measures, if we remember. So this has been a little. I mean this issue with housing, I think, is uh, the Achilles heel of many politicians, because you need a real plan to tackle it. It just gonna go away with pure demagoguery.
Well, what they can do too, what they'll kind of do to kick the can down the road is use a consultant. That's what governments like to do. They'll bring in these outside experts, quote unquote, and
Uh-huh.
then and that kind of like that kind of they'll be like, oh look, we have a consultant. We're doing something. Do we actually do something? Probably not, but at least we look like we're doing something. It's all smoke and mirrors, to be honest.
Yes. Yes.
Exactly. I feel, again, like when I mentioned, is that the topic of immigration. I think we should have an episode where we talk about it, because it's like everywhere you go, it's Europe, North America, South America. It's a contentious topic that it's on everyone's minds. And it's interesting that it's regardless of where the people come from, or even regardless of like political affiliation, it's something that the entire world is dealing with right now. I was just realizing, for example, yesterday that Chile has like, I think it's like 400,000 Venezuelan immigrants, and you notice it when you go to Santiago. You
That's in
actually notice it.
Peruvian.
Oh, do you know that there's like 1 million Venezuelans in Peru?
There's more than that, man. Remember,
Wow.
I was in Peru only in April and May and a bit of June. Like it's worse than it was. Like I remember going to Peru back in like the first time was back in 17. Then I went back again in 18. Each time I kept noticing it. Like there was more and more Venezuelans on the street. This time around, it was a lot of illegal ones coming in from Chile. And
Yeah.
I recognized it because the police were starting to really go around and check documents. I got stopped a few times because for some reason they thought I was Venezuelan, and then I opened my mouth and they realized, oh wait, he's not from Caracas, he's from Canada. Um, but
No.
but I mean, hey, like it was really unique for me because I'm not used to getting stopped and asked for documentation. Like it's very, very different for me.
Yes.
And but the issue it's growing there. Like I saw so many people um begging on the streets. I saw a lot more people at the food kitchen that I used to volunteer at in Remac down in near Central Lima. I mean, it was crazy, guys. Like I couldn't believe it. I knew the migration issue in Lima was bad prior, but this time it's gotten to the point where it's just crazy. And the thing is, I was speaking with a police captain about the issue, and he was telling me he's like, "There's not really much we can do because we don't have like no countries around us want these people. So where are we going to deport them to? We can't really deport them. We can kind of give them a fine or something and send them on their way, but we can't really kick them out because we have nowhere to send them, and we have international agreements that protect their rights and this and that." But I mean, the issue is there. The resentment was really bad. The only place I didn't really notice too much of an issue was in Uruguay. You go to Montevideo and it's like you don't see any of this kind of stuff. You see a couple of like homeless people, but it's nothing like Lima. It was night and day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's weird because, and this is when I'm gonna finish into this aspect. But for example, when I went to Santiago, I remember that before the pandemic, and even before like the estallido social, I remember that I went to the center of Santiago for some errands, and of course, centers capital city of Chile. Well, of course, our largest city, like 6 million people, most of the population is there. And right now, if you go to the center of Santiago, you immediately realize when the people start speaking something different, because you start to hear people speaking with a Colombian accent, the Venezuelan. Then there was one time where I couldn't understand what they were talking about, and they were talking in Creole. But
I
it's
I thought it
incredible
was
in such a short time.
I thought it was Creole myself at first, but then I realized I was just in Montevideo, and Uruguayans are not comprehensible to me. Because I mean, like, listen, they like when I was telling them about Peru, they're like, "Oh, you have the president Pedro Castillo." And I was like, the what?
Tisha.
Castillo. And then they're like, "Do you want some pollo?" I was like, some what?" And then my Venezuelan friend, who was big shout out to our good friend Hematoxy here, Deborah. So I went to visit. I was there with like her and her husband and that, and they had to translate Uruguayo to me because I only understand, proper Spanish, Castellano. Um,
Exactly.
so it was really interesting to see. By the way, I do like Uruguay. It's quite nice.
It's pretty.
Horrifying. Oh, dude, it's so expensive though. It is ridiculously expensive. But the wine is
Hmm.
good, and the beef is even better. Like the Argentinians claim to have the best steak. No, man, you go to Montevideo, the food there is fantastic. Not as good as Peru, mind you. But if they had Uruguayan beef and Peruvian lomo, they conquer the world.
I mean, Uruguay is really similar to Argentina. Uh,
No,
so
Uruguay is functional Argentina.
yeah, I
I
mean,
mean, like the one I got to say this really quick. The one thing that really surprised me, all the buses there are electric. That was really weird for me.
this is starting to happen. Here in Mexico, that's starting to happen. Buses are beginning to become um, electric,
Because
but
Pemex is not the best anymore.
yeah, but it's nice. It's good that you bring up South America right now, because I mean it has become and well, these past months have been really interesting. What's been going on down there with the um, how you say, with the election cycle that has been going on. Uh, we in this case we are talking about three main elections. The one is currently going on in Argentina, and in in a couple of weeks is se- the the second round. Colombia had regional elections, and Ecuador had presidential elections. Uh, and I think in the case of Ecuador, I think it was a mixed bag. I think the best
Mm.
result, in, the country most benefited from these results was Colombia,
Yeah.
because I mean, as it was regional elections, but Gustavo Petro's party and coalition were destroyed. I mean, in some places they couldn't get more than 10% of the vote. In the major cities, they were erased. In Bogota, that used to be a bastion for the left wing parties, they were totally destroyed. I think his candidate there. Um, let me show. Let me tell you who was
Hmm.
Gustavo Bolivar. Um,
Okay.
if I don't, you may know him. Well, I don't know if you know him, but uh, he's he's become a he's famous uh, for he's a I mean he's a writer and a politician. One of his and some of his books have been made into novels. I mean, one that is rather famous is Sin tetas no hay paraíso. Without tits, there's no
Eh,
paradise.
I know, familiar with it.
yeah, but I mean, he's still no Mario Vargas Llosa.
Yeah, I mean, he is not Mario Vargas Llosa. I mean, this
One
guy.
comment I can make regarding Colombia is that it's interesting because uh, Colombia is really interesting in South America because they've never had a left wing president for decades. This is the first
Yeah,
guy in power who is a left wing, and because Colombia is a really conservative country
and
in
they
terms of like
already have buyer's remorse.
exactly in
Oh,
really in terms of culture and they're very religious. Like Colombians are really religious. They're really conservative. So when Petro won, it was a shock for many that wow, we're seeing change. But the thing is that the problem with guys like Petro is that he's the kind of guy who was behind like supporting pardons to FARC fighters. He was
Yeah.
supporting the pardons to these guys. He was supporting like the peace process, which we know how it went. And
Mhm.
you also have the fact that he's now dealing with corruption scandals, the fact that his son was linked with drug trafficking. So he's more of the same. And that's the thing with South American politics is that you elect a guy who you think is going to be different, but then you find out that no, he's actually the same.
Yes.
Just the flag has changed.
I mean, and in a country like Colombia, in which the general attorneys have a tendency to go against the government, his son is most likely going to prison, whatever he
I
has,
see.
and depending how he goes to prison, I think his son will rat on him, which
Likely.
is okay. I love the prospect of it. And I mean, I don't think Petro is going to really get a re-election. I mean, I'm not sure, but I mean, in some places, the Uribe, Álvaro Uribe, Juan Manuel Santos uh, allied themselves to oust Petro. And the most interesting thing is that in many of those places, they didn't even they didn't even need to go in alliance to oust Petro and his people. I mean, Petro won like let me check real quick.
Looking
Um,
at there's an article I'm reading about the conclusions that you can draw from this, and one of them they're
the,
talking about is that the opposition to Petro is not just right wing, is it also comes from center left parties.
yeah,
So
and
it's like it's not just and I was having checking that when you see the numbers, the right wing didn't won any. I mean, yeah, they won a victory against Petro, but the thing is that you still have the presidential election, and it's like a long time before that happens.
yeah,
This
and I
is
mean,
like a strategic victory in a sense.
Petro lost. Some other things that Petro lost. I mean, he lost in. He only won 3 governorships, and it was in some small departments like Amazonas, which
Hmm.
basically, I mean, he won there with 45% of the vote, uh, and he got only he got less than he got around 40,000 no 14,000 votes. I mean, it was and even there was a close. It was too close to call. Less than
Mm.
300 votes decided the outcome of that state, that particular state. But I mean, enough with Colombia. The conclusion here is that Petro is toast. Coming
Yeah,
the and I think he will end up in jail soon, coming soon.
he will end up in jail,
Very
and
like
we're
Latin
likely gonna
American.
see mm,
Uh,
Latin
Isn't
American.
that
Yeah.
very kind of like traditional Latin American tradition? I mean, at least in Peru, that's kind of where every president, instead of a presidential library like they have in the United States, they have a presidential prison for each one.
yeah,
Exactly.
I mean, I don't think another Colombian president has been in jail in at least in recent memory, but it gives me hope that someone like as corrupt and as crooked as Petro is going to jail hopefully soon.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of Ecuador, Correa lost again. He's the third president that, that he can't control. Uh, his candidate was Luisa Gonzalez. He did rather well in the first round. She got 33% of the vote, but and went to the second round against Daniel Noboa. He's from party Acción Democrática Nacional.
He's from
Uh,
Guayaquil.
yes, and it's more like a Big Ten party, a Coachemol party. Whoever wants to join is welcome. Some people
Hmm.
call them also left wing, but I've seen many people in social media commenting that no, look, Paraguay, no, Paraguay, sorry, Ecuador is turning to the right. No, no, Ecuador is not turning to the right. I I- they just can they just hate uh, Rafael Correa's guts. That's all. And I mean, let's mention something else that I think that marked this election: the assassination of a presidential candidate,
Oh yeah, yeah.
which
Yes.
was really sad affair.
It's
In
something
But
that
I
I
mean,
I don't think we never heard about that. Like
it's not
in
a really widely talked about thing, but like as you guys know, like I'm pretty sure I'm the only member of this podcast who's actually been to Ecuador. I spent some time over in Guayaquil, and like the the thing is that the security situation is really bad, especially on the coast, like in Guayaquil, like, especially. I remember like being told not to go outside after dark because of the gang wars, and this was only
yeah
like not last August, but like back in like August 2022. I was in Guayaquil, and I remember that like the second day I was there, an attempted assassination of a some leader of a gang there, where they ended up using several canisters of propane to try to kill this guy, and they did this almost in broad daylight. Like it was that blatant. And I mean, you would never think that Ecuador has this issue going on lately, but you do have a lot of the Mexican cartels moving in and kind of competing with the kind of like local Ecuadorian gangs, either competing with them or working alongside them.
yeah
I'm pretty sure it's which cartel is it again? Jalisco Nueva Generacion.
yeah
The new generation Jalisco cartel. I mean, they are a big force in Guayaquil. I'm really looking forward to seeing what this president is going to do about the situation in Guayaquil. I know Lasso was trying to do things, but Lasso had a lot of issues, and he wasn't a great president. He wasn't as bad, say for example, as Correa or as bad as Moreno, but you know, you got to work with the tools you got, and he didn't have too many
yes.
tools.
Another thing, Correa is trying to make things unbearable in Ecuador. He's trying to destroy governability there. And we have seen it with precisely with Lenin Moreno, who was
Hmm.
Correa's uh, chosen successor, and he decided to put it on trial, put him on trial, and I mean he's now a convicted criminal. He's not in jail, but he's there. There's a judicial ruling against him now.
Isn't Korea still in Belgium? I think. I
Yes,
think
he's
he's
in
still
Belgium
Yes,
hiding out in Belgium.
since
yes.
2017.
His wife is Belgian, so yes.
Yeah.
It's kind of a what's it called there? Who was that one president in Peru there whose wife is an American? I should know this name by now.
um.
He was just before he was after like the second Alan Garcia, or he was before Alan Garcia. Toledo, Alejandro Toledo. Kind
Yeah.
of the same thing. Whenever these guys have an issue, they'll usually like flee to another country, usually where their wives are from. And that's what Correa's done. That's what Toledo did. Um, and it's really interesting to see him try to kind of power broke things all the way in Belgium. And what
Yes.
scares me is that he still has the ability to meddle. And I mean, like every time a president does something that Correa doesn't like, you suddenly see this outburst of indigenous kind of protesting.
Yes.
Hmm.
I mean, we remember when they stormed Quito under Moreno,
Ah,
and
yes.
he
I
had to flee to
remember.
Guayaquil, and then
Hmm.
they
Oh yeah.
tried to, do it with Lasso, and Lasso was just like, yeah, I'm not doing this. Let's send it in the army.
Exactly.
It's
And
I
like
it,
mean,
it's like it.
I'm not playing. It's like I'm not playing.
yes. And well, the candidate that was assassinated was Fernando Villavicencio, a journalist, an investigative journalist that was trying to. He was really concerned with the security problem of Ecuador, and apparently he really became a thorn on the side of cartels and corrupt politicians. I think he got a couple of them behind bars. I think Correa is has been condemned to a prison sentence because of him also. I mean, and well, he he was assassinated because of it. It's a,
you.
it's it's a shame.
By the way, just a comment, and I found this. The seven the seven people, hidden people who were arrested for his assassination. By the way, the seven of them, all Colombian citizens,
Yes,
were later found dead in prison.
I think one didn't die and one was alive.
Yeah, but I will say that I'm not used to hearing about presidential candidates being assassinated. I, I mean, I remember when the last time I heard about that was like in some Central American country or Caribbean, like some like Nicaragua or Salvador.
It was
But I
Haiti.
never
It was
expected.
Haiti the last time that happened, and
Ah,
it was
yes.
Yeah,
Colombians involved in that one
IT
too.
already IT, and the thing is that I never thought that we'll see the day that it will happen in Ecuador. The thing is that someone could tell me, well, Ecuador is far away from Chile. No, not like that. I mean, is on my close neighborhood. Chile and Ecuador have had like important historical relations and ties, especially because we don't like Peru. Um, so it's really shocking to hear about this because the problem with Ecuador, and it's the same thing that's happening here in Chile. We're having an issue with the fact that we're having Colombian and Mexican cartels are infiltrating in our country. They're establishing territory. In the case of Chile, the Chilean gangs are fighting the Colombian and the Mexican cartels for turf, and innocents are in the crossfire. And the thing is that they have threatened judges, they have threatened journalists. So we're dealing with the same thing that will happen in Ecuador. Now, the difference with Ecuador is that at least there's hope in the hope at the end of the tunnel, because at least the people there are intelligent enough to elect someone who's going to fight for them. But in the case of Chile, we have a guy who seems more interested in protesting his own government than actually changing anything.
Yes.
Not to mention fully meddled with tons of scandals of corruption. By the way, I think we're going to talk about that in another episode about the disaster that has been the Boric presidency, because I feel that there's a lot of things that I want to go over.
Yeah, and well, moving on to the last election I wanted to talk about, Argentina. Again,
Argentina, Argentina.
Argentina is going is is having problems with this election now because, I mean, we all saw what happened in the PASO elections. The PASO elections are the primaries, which
Mhm.
PASO is an acronym for elecciones primarias, abiertas, simultáneas y obligatorias. Which, if you ask me, is a really great idea because you basically take all the power from or not all, but most of the power from the party's leadership, and
Mhm.
you have to ask people who they want as a candidate.
They don't
And
elect the candidate of closed doors, basically. It's a good idea.
exactly, exactly. And Milei was the big winner of the day with 30% of the vote that day. Second place was Patricia Bullrich, and third place was Sergio Massa. Sergio Massa, for those who don't know, is the Minister of Economics or Finances of Alberto Fernandez. Is the man who worsened the Argentina's economic situation, and I mean, and now he's going for the kill. He's going for to finish the job
It's
and destroy
it's
Argentina.
it's interesting. Oh, okay. So sorry, Ernest. You want to say something?
Yeah, yeah. I was just gonna say, like, I find it really weird that like Argentina has declined so much in the last 120 odd years. Where it was a country with such great potential, and then like they just decided, yeah, I know we're being successful right now, but let's just not do that and let's do the complete opposite. And I mean, like it's crazy. Like I have a lot of I have friends here who are Argentinians, and I mean they're like the sons of immigrants to Argentina from other countries, and they're telling me like it's gotten worse. And I mean like, and one guy was just like, listen, man, like when I say Argentina's gotten worse, it's actually gotten worse. It's already pretty bad. I mean,
Yes,
because everyone knows that Argentina is dysfunctional Uruguay. That's all it is. It's just a dysfunctional version of Uruguay with that
yes,
same kind
It's
of strange dialect.
it's interesting because I still remember, like I'm still young enough to remember that the first time I watched the news with my parents, I think it was like maybe 6, 5 years old. I still remember with crystal clarity economic crisis in Argentina, and every single time I see
Never
Argentina
stopped.
mentioned in the news, it's the same thing. It always
No,
happens. Now, I, I'm sure that there's going to be a reason why, and I actually want to research that because it's an interesting rabbit hole. But the thing about the election that has me like,
Peron.
well, yeah, Peron. Yeah, it's funny that they revere the man, but when you start looking at it, the problems of Argentina started with Peron. But the thing I want to
But like
mention
the
is that
I mean,
it's
I
Mhm.
think I have said this before in this podcast. As in every Mexican, there's a priista deep down. Like in every Argentinian, there's a peronista deep down.
Yeah,
there is, but I mean like guys, like I've been looking at the at El Peluche, and
Yes.
he scares me. Like I at first I thought he was kind of a meme. He was kind of like free
Milei.
packalism too.
Yeah,
I
Yeah,
was
like the fish. Sorry.
just I was going to mention. I mean, if you saw the results from the PASO elections to the first round, he actually got almost the same number of votes. I mean,
Mm,
he didn't grow anything. I mean,
yeah.
now and in this election, this first round of election was Sergio Massa, Javier Milei, which is running on a political poverty platform, or what people call libertarianism. Uh, Patricia Bullrich as the main opposition, and some dude Juan Schiaretti is he's another peronista, but not. Peronista, not a Kirchnerista. He's gone. And
Yeah,
so, some comic named Miriam Bregman.
Yeah, Breckman. I remember watching the debates. I watched some of the debates, and it's interesting that I could immediately tell what they were for because Bregman was the classic communist in South America, the one that blames every single problem of crime and poverty on capitalism. Schiaretti was obsessed of talking about being the governor of Cordoba. That was the only thing he talked about. But he always struck me as a really traditionalist Peronista. Like he struck me as the kind of guy who he went to school with Peron. Like how old is he? 74. Shit, born in 1949. And Bullrich was like the safe choice for many of the Argentinian right.
I think she was the best choice for Argentina in general. I mean, she is also willing to confront these people like Sergio Massa, Cristina Fernandez, and all these left-wing politicians that have put Argentina in the toilet. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean but Milei has some positions that are plainly stupid. Like one of his diputadas was proposing uh, that men could renounce to the paternity of the child,
Oh yeah, sorry.
and or breaking diplomatic relationships with the Holy See. I mean,
I mean,
what,
it.
I mean, now Milei, if he wants to win, he needs the votes of Patricia Bullrich, more
Yeah, I
and
was seeing
almost all of them.
that yeah, I was seeing that actually I think Bullrich gave Milei his support, also Macri, and
Yeah, but I
it's
mean,
interesting the way. Mhm.
no, I was just gonna
Go
say
ahead.
the only thing growing on Millet is his hair. That's the only thing that
Yes,
grows with him.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean
that
the
and
thing, to
that
be
and the
honest,
list of
is that
weird things he's into.
I mean I
It's
remember
every
I
day
read
it's a
that he
new
cloned
like
his
weird.
yeah he cloned his dogs. You know that
Yeah, he's a very
he
strange man. Like I at
mm,
first when I first saw him, I was like, okay, maybe this is okay. And then I actually started reading about him, and I was like, oh wow, no, just no. Like
to,
he's like Bolsonaro. Bolsonaro was a libertarian weirdo.
in fact that's the thing that
Bolsonaro
I
was a
consider
libertarian.
interesting. Yeah, that's the thing I think is interesting because I remember when results came in and you had Millet with, of course, like he got like the 30% of the vote compared to Massa who got 36%. Something really struck me, and I remember I mentioned it to you, Eduardo, that I was watching a column, an opinion column about the election, and one of the things that they mentioned is that 18 million Argentinians live off the government in a
Yes,
country of 40 million. That's not a small
75% of
number.
the 75% of Argentinian, no, actually more. I think it was 89% of Argentinian households receive
Yeah,
some kind of
during
benefits from the government.
COVID,
That's
yeah, yeah, there was an article I read during
it's
COVID.
ridiculous.
89%, yeah, 89% of Argentinians during COVID lived in a home that received government subsidies. I don't know how it is now, but it had to be similar. And to me, is that's the problem. Argentina spends too much money. In fact, that's the problem that people like Milei have talked about. Because here's the thing: think what you want about Milei, about his policies that are not going to go well. In fact, for example, changing the currency to the dollar, dollarization is something that, I mean, yeah, Ecuador did it, but Ecuador is like a small thing compared to Argentina, and it hasn't even been that helpful for Ecuador either. But it's to me is that Milei has shown, at least to a lot of people, the fact that a lot of Argentinians are really tired of electing basically both poisons, Kirchneristas or Peronistas. But the problem is that I feel that a lot of people are just not ready to let all those benefits that they get from the government. They're not ready to abandon those.
Yes, I mean, but in this case, Kirchneristas and Peronistas are basically the same. Just Kirchneristas are an offshoot of
Yep.
Peronistas.
Kirchner is
Uh,
just the emperor. It's just like the she empress,
yeah,
like a Star Wars empress. I think that she's sitting in
the
the Casa
okay,
Rosada with a cape.
yeah. The thing is that here, I mean, the second round is in 2 weeks. Then we need to, well, we'll keep an eye on it. I mean, because
Hmm.
in the coming weeks, there's a couple more of elections here in South. Well, not here. There in South America. But not to elect some to elect public offices, but there's a referendum in Venezuela which, if you ask me, will amount to an act of war about the Esequiba region, and in Chile
Still going after that?
yes, and in Chile the constitution will be voted also.
Oh yeah, yes, guys. Let me tell you this. It's it's gonna be a bloodbath. I'm not
Yes,
kidding.
I'm sure.
It's gonna be a disaster. And the thing is that whatever choice it's made, the constitution debacle that we're living is not gonna end in the next 5 years. Like we're gonna still living on there, and that was the fear that a lot of people had, that we're gonna have to be like like a lot of people feel that what we're gonna do is that we're gonna vote until the new a new constitution is like elected into power. Like that's basically what people were afraid of, and that's what seems we're gonna have now.
Yes. So, a couple of comments before moving on. I just want
Hmm.
to thank Steven. He's an artist on Twitter. He's his handle is in the description of this episode, and his art fund project is also in the description. So if you want to donate a couple of a little money, uh, he he's welcoming the donations. He makes historic illustrations. He's from England, so he's basically doing these most illustration. Most of his illustrations are from medieval England and the Roman Empire, and Roman Empire with topics related to England, like Constantine the Great. And yes, he also made my avatar. I mean, he made it with the AI, but I mean, he go ahead and check it. I think you'll like it, and that's one. And remember, the music we use was made by your friend Idomeneus. The link to his music is also in the description. Um, then try it. Hope you like it. It's really interesting. Helps you concentrate.
Yeah, let's go.
And
Yes, it does.
okay, Pablo, you were going to tell us something about a really contentious issue.
Yeah, so right now, as you are aware, we are witnessing another episode in the long running conflict of Israel and Palestine. Now, this is a conflict that a lot of people are heavily invested on, a lot of people who have friends, family, or who have a personal connection or even a political connection to it. Personally, I don't have it. My problem is that there's a lot of people making certain claims that are not part of the historical context of this conflict, because I will say it's simple. This war didn't start at 75 years ago. In fact, the whole problem is that the conflict really, when you start to research about it, everyone can claim this land, both Jews and Palestinians. And I will say to this that my thoughts and prayers go to the civilians, both Arabs and Jews, who have to deal with, number one, you have to deal with Israelis and their airstrikes, and also you have to deal with Hamas, who hide their missile launchers in hospitals and schools. So my thoughts are going with the civilians, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the historical context of this because I feel it's important. Give me a second before I can share my screen because I made a presentation note from this. Give me a second. Okay. Can you see my screen?
There you go. Yes,
Okay, so uh give me a second.
I'm
So
gonna I remove the banner because it was covering, or
Yeah,
let me see if you
yeah,
can.
yeah. Here it is. So Israel and Palestine maps. First of all, I want to say something. This map that you see here, that everyone and your mom in Facebook uses, is misleading. It's not
Yes.
incorrect. It's not incorrect because the thing I'm going to say is not incorrect because it doesn't. It shows actual bits and pieces of history, but the problem is that it's misleading because this is not exactly what happened. And in fact, the biggest problem here is that it considers Palestine to be a country. First thing we have to get out of the way: Palestine has never been an independent country.
Yes.
It was a mandate by the British in which both Jews and Arabs were Palestinians. Now, does that mean that they don't deserve a country? No. It's just that the historical precedent is not there. I'm sorry if I sound like a little stern with this. Is that I don't like people who try to do historical revisionism in general, be whatever political affiliation. And first of all, I'm going to try to condense a lot of history here. Uh, this region was originally called Canaan after the Canaanites, and it was part of the Egyptian New Kingdom. The first thing you're going to notice of this region of the world is that it connects three continents: Europe, Asia, and Africa. And
Yes.
it's a region that has been the province of various big empires, in this case, of the Egyptians. In fact, the Canaanites were vassals to the Egyptians. There's an inscription in a stele, the Merneptah stele, I think it's from like the 5th century BC, which I can be wrong, sorry, sometimes I mess up the dates, but the stele makes mention of the land of Israel. Now, is the oldest inscription allegedly, because there's debate that either it's supposed to mention Israel, others say that it mentions another land, but it says that the Egyptians laid waste to the region of Israel. There's another name also attested in Egyptian sources called Peleshet, which is also the old term for Palestine, because um, there is a conversation of whether or not Palestine evolved from Philistine. The problem is that the Philistines were not Arabs. The Philistines were descendants of Mycenaean Greeks. So I don't know how the whole thing. Maybe I have to do more research on that. But what we know is
You
that there were
mean, are you
two.
referring like the
Mhm.
sea peoples?
Yeah, because the thing about the Philistines is that they are descendants from the sea peoples. Because and I remember that reading about the archaeology of the Philistines is that their architecture and their culture seems to be heavily based on or Mycenaean Greeks. So there's the whole conversation that I've seen a lot of people have, that Palestine is actually comes from Philistine. There's a whole discussion there, but I haven't researched about it extremely well. Now, around this time, there were two kingdoms in this land: the Israel and Judah. According to biblical tradition, these two kingdoms were united by Solomon, who built the first temple.
Yes.
Now, the Bible it goes without saying that it's not a historical text. But the thing is that I always consider that the Bible can be considered as oral tradition that became legend. So maybe there wasn't a biblical Solomon, but maybe there was a king who did build the first temple. But that was the state of affairs in this corner of the world. And then it comes the Assyrians, one of the first great empires in history. They conquered the north, but Judah remained a vassal state.
Just a comment. If you ever talk about evil imperialism, I think the Assyrians were the worst of all.
Oh
They
yeah, yeah.
they were
Yeah,
they were really
yeah.
cruel.
I mean, yeah, and I mean, like we have to remember one thing, guys. Like this kind of history, this kind of topic, especially considering the like Solomon and these other kind of Judean kings, is kind of something that I study because I'm not sure if like our audience remembers this or knows this. I'm a theology student, quite literally, and yeah, so the Assyrians and the Babylonians, and to a small extent the Persians, have had a role to play in this whole matter.
Yes.
um, and it is very interesting to see how people have taken this issue. I try not to look at it from a religious standpoint, but at the same time, I mean, while the Bible is not a historical text per se, as would be the Anabasis or other kind of texts like that. It does still have semi-historical value. It does describe the kings with some accuracy. I mean, bias, of course, because this is a Jewish text, for the most part, especially the Old Testament. But there's a lot of really interesting things around this, and this whole matter of the claims to the land and the historical background of it, and the fact that one of the most significant sites of Islam now, Al Aqsa Mosque, is built
Mhm.
on Solomon's Temple.
The
Yes.
Temple Mount, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So, as you can see, the Assyrian Empire, like I mentioned, one of the first true empires in the sense of organization, conquered the North Kingdom of Israel, but Judah was made a vassal state. Um, of course, the Assyrians, brutal conquerors, destroyed entire cities, flayed people, made pyramids of skulls. Not pretty, and they
Um,
made
and
images of
brag about
themselves
it.
too. And proud about it. Like it's like that meme that goes, "I'm proud of my history." Yeah, you shouldn't. Like
Yeah,
that's
no,
the
they,
case with the Assyrians.
they brag about their inhuman treatment of their basals.
It's like, wait, did we just genocided that entire kingdom just for fun? Yes, and we were gonna make a relief with our king doing it because we're cool. Well, eventually the Assyrians fell, and it came the Babylonian Empire. Now, under the Babylonians, the Jews rebelled, and Babylon, under the king Nebuchadnezzar II, or how we call it in Spanish, Nabucodonosor, he conquered the kingdom of Judah, destroyed and sacked the city of Jerusalem, destroyed the first temple, Solomon's temple, and he deported the Israelites to Babylon. This is the Babylonian exile. Now, an interesting aspect of this is that this is where a lot of aspects of Babylonian culture influenced the writings of the Bible and the Jewish culture. In fact, that's one of the reasons why a lot of elements of the Bible are similar to stories found in Mesopotamia and ancient Sumer. Mhm.
One more thing, really, really quick. Sorry to kind of keep cutting in on this part, but
Oh,
like,
it's okay. It's okay.
since
I like
since it
your
is,
input.
yeah. Plus, it is kind of what I'm doing my bachelor's in. The other thing too is that it also influenced Judean Jewish religious practices, because the altars have horns, and horns on the altar are a generally like a Babylonian um, kind of
Mm,
addition, because this came from the root, like the leading class of the Judeans who were taken to Babylon as part of the captivity. You have the story of Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, all of these kind of individuals. Um, and the thing is, they talk about the Babylonian captivity, they talk about Nebuchadnezzar. There's one fun or kind of interesting aspect of this where Daniel predicts that Nebuchadnezzar is going to go pretty much insane.
oh yeah,
Um,
he's gonna
and
become a
Yes.
beast.
yeah, yeah. The funny thing is that this is the one part that I call kind of nonsense on, because if this had actually happened, if someone as major of a figure as Nebuchadnezzar just suddenly went nuts and just randomly ran outside the city and started eating grass and living like an animal, I'm pretty sure that somehow and somewhere this would have been recorded. It's not recorded. This is the only basis we have from this is the Old Testament, and so that's why, like, the matter of Daniel sometimes can be very I guess what's the word young people use these days? Sus.
Exactly. So basically, the Jews will spend time in Babylon until the arrival of. Oh, I think there was a part I deleted. But okay, so
Cyrus.
yeah, Cyrus the Great. So it's interesting because when the Ecumenic Persians arrive in power and rule the entirety of the known world, under Cyrus the Great, he allowed religious freedoms to everyone who had been conquered by the Babylonians and had suffered the suppression of the religion. And he allowed them to return to Israel. Now, this is an interesting thing because Cyrus helped fund the construction of the Second Temple. And he is perhaps, and I've seen this from every source I've consulted, he's one of the, if not the only, non Jewish person who is revered in Judaism. because of what
He
he
is a
did for the
Messiah.
Jews. He allowed it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's designated a Messiah.
yeah. In
Yes,
fact, in
yes.
many
So
in many writings, he said that Yahweh himself anointed him to return the Jews home, and he did. And the Jews returned home, and they live in that region, which the Persians called Jehud, based on the name of Judea.
Yeah,
Now, what will happen later is that a little particular character known Alexander the Great conquers the Persian Empire, spreading Greek culture where he goes. Now, there's not much to tell about Alexander's conquest of this region other than,
uh,
well, he conquered the city of Tyre.
can
But what
I
happened later? Mhm,
can I make an announcement?
mhm.
Yeah. In the coming weeks, I'm going to be on as a guest on. There will be an episode of another podcast named Tiempos Imposibles, in which I am a guest. I'm we're, this is a podcast about alternate history. So we are in this episode. We are talking about what would happen if Alexander didn't die.
Interesting
So
subject.
I mentioned something about this the Jewish not becoming this radicalized because of the Greeks, because Alexander was
Yeah,
more open to freedom of religion and all.
that was
And
good. I'm going to mention because after Alexander dies, the his generals divide his empire, and we see the rise of the Ptolemaic kingdom under Ptolemy in Egypt, and the Seleucid Empire, mostly based on Syria and the former lands of Asia. The Both the Seleucids and the Ptolemaics will fight for Canaan during this time, and eventually the Seleucids will come to rule it. Now, an interesting thing happened where the Jews started to Hellenize. They began to adopt elements of Greek culture, clothing, hair, even hairstyling. Um, and the thing is that they started even to adopt elements of Greek religion. In fact, there's something that happened that a lot of the Hellenized Greeks were of the noble of the high society class in the region of Judea. And that made a lot of the more traditional Jews mad because you're adopting elements of a pagan culture. Eventually, and I'm really shortening the story, the this all culminated with when the Seleucids tried to even prohibit the worship of the Jews, and that all erupted in the Maccabean revolt
yes,
that
yes.
succeeded in making the kingdom of Judea into an independent kingdom under the Hasmonean dynasty. But then comes perhaps the one that we all think about, the Romans.
yeah,
Now, the Roman Empire rules over the region, which is named Judea. Originally, it was controlled by a vassal king. One particular name comes to mind, Herod the Great. Um,
There
During
are a
this
couple
time,
Herods
there were.
actually.
Hmm?
There's a couple of
What?
Herods actually, and
yes,
Yeah, it's like. Mhm.
the group that you're referring to with kind of the split with the traditional Jews. The kind of ruling class became known as the Sadducees, and then you have the Pharisees,
Oh,
who are
Saduceus. Yes, I remember. I remember in
yeah,
school.
yeah,
I
yeah.
read about them.
So you have them, and then you have the Pharisees, who are the kind of the they consider themselves to be the inheritors of the law of Moses. You know, they are the
Oh, yeah,
interpreters, and I mean, and
the
yeah,
more
yeah, yeah. So I
orthodox.
mean, like they are the Orthodox class, and that's why you
Oh, of
have a
course.
lot of the issues within the Gospels. You know, Jesus isn't going up against the Sadducees per se. He's going up against the Pharisees, and that's kind of what
Yeah, I
leads to
remember.
him being killed. But yeah, so
In
like the
school, they told
Pharisees
me
are
that.
the yeah, so like the issue with the Pharisees is a really interesting and complex one. I'm actually doing a lot of research into it right now, and maybe we can do an episode on this in the future because it is a very fascinating topic.
It is
But
like schools of religion are really interesting to study.
oh goodness, yes, yes, and I mean, so there is it is that,
Mm.
and I just wanted to kind of step in and clarify about that.
Yeah, it's thank you for your input. It really helps telling the story because I feel that it's information that is important to learn about it. So, under the Romans, the region is known as Judea. As I mentioned, it was originally a vassal kingdom, but eventually it becomes under full Roman rule. Now, under the Romans, um, there were three communities mostly in this region around this time. The first one are the Greeks who live mostly in the coastal cities. Then you have the Romans who have most of the administration, and then you have the Jews who made the majority of the population. Of course, the Jews will rebel many times, as we know, and the Romans will just simply just conquer, sack Jerusalem, and will destroy the temple. One that comes to mind is Titus, who took the menorah from the temple back to Rome. Funny thing about that is that no one knows where it is. I remember reading somewhere that apparently it was in Rome, then the Vandals took it to Africa, and after that we don't know what happened to it. There's also a conspiracy theory that says that it's under the Vatican, but I don't believe it. I believe that someone like melted for coins. But one interesting aspect of this is that the region receives a name change under Emperor Hadrian, Syria Palestina. And this is an interesting part of the story, because a lot of people, especially the Palestinian side, use this as an example that, see, there was a place called Palestine. And I'm like, yeah, but again, it's like an empire gives you your name. That's really weird thing to claim as like a point of pride. But he did it because he wanted to reduce the influence of the Jews in the region, because of course they love rebelling against the Romans, because the Romans the Romans are pagan mostly. And well, eventually the Roman Empire will subside, civil wars, the division between West and East, sad story. And I'm cutting the Byzantines out of the picture because then comes the arrival of the caliphates. Now, this marks the arrival of the Arabs to this region of the world. Now, Arabs have been a part of the Middle East for a long time. We know about this. We know the Romans know about them. Arabia Felix, Arabia Petria. We're familiar with it. But the thing is that Arabs were never exactly. And the thing is that Arabs were never an important part of the population of Judea around the time. I mean, they you can find them as traders and in some of the cities, but they were never part of the population as you might think. That only changes when you have the caliphates, the under the Islamic rule. Now, first things first, there's a claim that says that the Palestinians are descendants of the people who have been living here for millennia. Now, there's a truth to it in the sense that where the Arabs went, they Islamized and Arabized the populations they encountered. This is something that we know. The thing is that I found that it's really interesting that when you mention that the Palestinians descend from pagans, you mean Canaanites in the past, they seem not to be so keen of the idea. And it's something that I've noticed when it comes to the history of Arab countries, in that Arabs seem to think that they've always been Muslims. And that's something that is a tradition that I see in many Arab countries, and in very prominent Arab writers talk about it. And it's really interesting way of viewing the world, like completely forgetting of the native cultures that live there. But how the Jews live under this regime? Well, badly. They had to pay the jizya, a tax that goes to the Islamic State to pay for Islamic warriors fighting against non-believers. Only non-believers have to pay it. And at one point, as you mentioned during our conversation, they made converts even pay it.
Yeah, the Umayyad.
And so around this time, a lot of Jews started leaving the Middle East, and you will find them, of course, in many European countries, the Holy Roman Empire, the Balkans, Spain. I remember that in Spain they also suffered a lot of persecution, not only on the Umayyads, but also on the Spanish Castilian rulers. Eventually, the Arab caliphates.
The Romans were the ones that resettled them, forcefully resettled them.
Exactly. Eventually, again, I'm cutting parts of the history because it's like a lot of history to cover. But eventually, it comes to prominence perhaps the major power, the Ottoman Empire. The interesting thing about the Ottoman Empire is that they keep some practices of the old caliphates in terms of, like, for example, the taxes on non-Muslims. And here's the interesting thing. During that time, that region was part of this province of Syria, and also, and this is a map I found of the names of the provinces. And I'm sorry for the definition, but as you can see, none of these regions are called Palestine. In fact, they have completely different names. The Sanjak of Jerusalem, Balka, Acre, Galilee, see Galilee right there, Vilayet of Syria, which cover mostly, it all takes part in the Vilayet of Beirut. So it's really interesting that the Turks who support now Palestine, they didn't recognize it back then. Eventually, after the First World War, the Ottoman Empire collapses, and then you have the Europeans doing what they do, which is empire, and they divided the lands of the Ottoman Empire. Now, there was an agreement. The name is escaping me right now. Pico Agreement, 1960, which was which the agreement, and I remember this was during the time when they were helping the Arab revolt against the Ottoman rule. And the promise was to build an Arab caliphate. The thing that happened was that when the Ottoman Empire collapsed and the Turkish Republic was born, the Western allies were, well, the reason why we wanted to make the caliphate no longer exists. So what are we going to do? So basically, they decided to divide the lands of the Middle East for themselves. And then we have the British Mandate of Palestine. Originally, it encompassed parts of Palestine and also Transjordan, but then they divided it. And here it is where we get to like modern times, to the main crux of the issue. So that's why you get the modern Palestine we're talking about. Here's an interesting thing. This is a map of 1945 of the British Mandate that shows land ownership of Arabs and Jews. As you can see, blue is Jew and green is Arab. This is the majority. This is where the majority population is. Now, I'm not so sure which date it is. But 1945, like listen, 3 years before the declaration of the State of Israel, you can consider that a lot of people already arriving here. And here's the funny thing: when you compare it to the two-state solution, it's kind of funny the overlap.
Yes,
it's not perfect, but it exists. Now, of course, we know the famous two-state solution. Problem is an Arab state and a Jewish state. Now, the thing about this was that the Arabs said no, the Jews said yes, and the problem was for the Arabs that the Jews were like a third of the population. Now, of course, this plan was not accepted, but the thing was that the Israelis, the moment that the British Mandate ended, they declared themselves independent, declaring the State of Israel. And what happened eventually was that the Arab states were not happy, and so we had the first Arab-Israeli war in 1948, where we have most of the modern borders of Israel. Funny thing, the Israelis fought this war. They started with 3 Sherman tanks that were made from spare parts, and also they received a lot of shipments from weapons, mostly former German surplus weapons. So the State of Israel, a state of Jews, fought with rifles intended to be used by the Nazis, which is an interesting turn of events, to say the least. Of course, how this war ends is that, as you see, divided the Cisjordania and Gaza. After this, you have also the Suez Crisis, but I decided not to include it because I don't consider it important. But you have the 6-Day War. Now, something we mentioned with Eduardo in a conversation we had before was how important a figure such as General Nasser is in Egypt, who led his country against Israel many times, which I think it's a figure that I think is not well researched or understood in the West as it is in the Middle East. And I think he's someone who deserves a lot of more of respect, especially in historical circles, because I feel that you cannot properly talk about Arab nationalism or the post-colonial states of the Middle East without speaking of Nasser. So the 6-Day War, they decided to invade again. Israel repeals them, and Israel occupies a lot of territory: whole of Sinai, Golan Heights, and Cisjordan. The thing about this war is that the PLO was founded 3 years before this war, the Palestinian Liberation Organization. And after the war, they went to Jordan and they started cross-border raids on Israel. King Hussein of Jordan actually gave them refuge. what happened was that then the PLO found the king not to be really willing to go to war to Israel, and they tried to overthrow him. That was the Black September. And eventually, the Jordanians will expel the Palestinian fighters, and the Palestinians will go to Lebanon, where they will fight with the Sunni Muslims against the Maronite Christians. And that's a different story. In fact, I think we should make an episode on Lebanon because it's a really interesting conflict.
Yes.
Eventually, you have this is the last major war, the Yom Kippur War, named after the Jewish holiday. This is interesting because even though it was a victory for the Israelis, they realized that they couldn't keep this state of constant invasion and struggle against the Arab powers as they have done it before. They couldn't expect to always dominate in everything. So eventually, what happened after this conflict, when it ended, you have the Camp David Accords, where they brokered peace with Egypt. They withdrew from the Sinai in '82, leaving it back to Egypt. But what happened was that they didn't return the Golan Heights, and the reason is mostly because the Golan Heights are a really strategic location for Israel. They're the high ground, which Syria has used them to bomb Israel a lot of times. So I don't know how the state of that is right now, but it's like still contested to this day. The thing is that even though the Arab states have looked to get closer with Israel, the struggle of the Palestinians has continued, and I say even intensified. Now, during that period, you have the creation of the Authority of Palestine, and here's what you get the modern deal we are dealing today. Of course, as you see, Cisjordan and Gaza. Now, what's going on right now, and that's the thing I'm going to finish with is that Hamas invaded Israeli territory from their bases in Gaza. And right now, we're having a fight over the city, over a small strip of land. Consider that this is a really, really small piece of land where 2 million people live. And this is a map of the latest situation, by the way. Israel has completely locked off Gaza City from the rest of Gaza. I haven't been aware of further advances. The only information I've received is that airstrike have been intensified. It's not looking good. They've also discovered a lot of rocket launchers of Hamas from inside hospitals and schools. What I want to finish with this is that the whole story I just mentioned is not to justify the existence of Israel or Palestine. Is more to say that there's more history to this than people are led to believe. And if you use arguments to say, oh, Palestinians deserve a nation, well, so the Jews deserve a nation. It's a region that everyone can claim as their own. Now, do I think that means the death of hundreds? No, I don't think so. And I don't know. It's just, to me, someone who doesn't have a stake on this, it's just an ugly war for me. It's just ugly. It's a medieval war with modern weapons.
Yes. So, okay, I think we covered the topics for today, and we'll keep you posted with any developments that occur on those fronts. And well, guys, this was our return after a year absent from this platform. It was nice to see you and listen and hear you again.
Yeah.
So,
Definitely.
time to say goodbye.
Yeah. Have a good night, guys.
Thank you, everyone. And remember, you can see our Twitter handles on the ticker in the lower part of your screen, and you can also follow us on Discord. We have the link to our server in the description. Thanks everyone for listening to us. We're coming back next week with some or maybe this weekend. I don't know. With more topics that you might find interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, everyone, and have a good night.
Good night, everyone.